Wilko Stark, Vice President of Strategy for Daimler. Welcome to Stanford.
And thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to the Industrialist Dilemma. We're excited to have you in class today. And we wanted to get started by asking you at a high level, what are your responsibilities at Daimler? As in charge of strategy and product planning, what do you do on an everyday basis at the company?
Actually, my responsibility is to define the future of Daimler and in particular, Mercedes Benz cars. And we are facing a lot of challenges in the automotive industry. So my key work is actually to manage the transformation process. Because to identify the trends is one thing, what is even more important really to manage the transformation process for the whole company to stay also in the next 130 years successful.
So let's start with some of those transformations that are happening externally. What are the three biggest things that keep you up at night as you think about Daimler and Mercedes on a go-forward basis?
Actually, we are talking always at Daimler about four major trends.
Okay.
And it's on the one hand side, it's connectivity, it's the change to electric cars, it's autonomous driving, and it's everything about shared mobility and mobility of the future. And the key challenge is actually not managing these four trends, but also the combination of these trends. Because the company who really manages the combination of these four trends will define the future of mobility. And what is also quite challenging, there are so many regulations and different regulations if it comes to the US, if it comes to Europe, if it comes to China, and we have to cope with these regulations. And that's also a big, big challenge, and it costs us a lot of money.
So what business do you think Daimler is in? If you think about, this company is over 130 years old, or almost 130 years old, what business is the firm in today?
That's a pretty good question. Actually, our key business is still building, producing, developing cars. So this is the backbone of Daimler and of course trucks and of Mercedes Benz cars. But the world is changing. And it's not only about owning a car, it's also about renting, sharing a car, ride-hailing, etc. And we have to cope with all these trends. So on the one hand side, key work is still done on building the best cars of the world, but we have to offer our customers a completely new platform and services so that we can cope with these trends and have the right answer to our customers. Because what is very, very important from our perspective, we do not want to lose the direct customer interface.
Now, how would that impact how you work with your channel and your dealers and all these people who have been with you for a long time as the product that you sell and the services that you sell change pretty dramatically over the next decade?
I think this is actually, the key challenge because we have to manage this transformation process. Of course, on the one hand side, for our traditional customers, we still need the dealerships, but for our new customers, we are looking for a direct channel. Okay. And we're also selling the cars over the internet, but we also have contracts with our dealers. And this is the whole transformation process we have to manage. And this is maybe one challenge, but even bigger challenge is the transformation we see in our whole product portfolio. If it comes to electrification, if it comes to autonomous driving, because the whole platform architecture of an electric car is completely different compared to a combustion engine car. And this means we have to invest billions and billions of dollars or euros to cope with these trends and to come up with completely new platform architectures. Take it as an example, autonomous driving. We strongly believe that in the future of mobility, autonomous driving will be a big part of it. And this also includes sharing mobility, ride-hailing services, etc. So I give you an example. Uber quite well in the US, Lyft, etc., Didi in China. Actually, we do as Daimler have the same in Germany, in Europe. It's called My Taxi. It's more or less the same app, but of course we have to cope with the regulations of the taxi business in Germany, in Europe. So that's a slightly different story, but it's actually completely the same. So we are offering our services, our customers, all these services. And that's very important because, our strategy is we want to build and define the future of mobility. It's not the future of the car, it's the future of mobility.
Okay, so Daimler historically has been an engineering powerhouse. I mean, this is some of the greatest engineering minds and some of the greatest cars that have been built. We were talking about them earlier, the S-Class series, et cetera. And now as mobility changes, you have to bring in new competencies and new skill sets. Talk a bit about how you bring those new behaviors, those new competencies inside of the firm, and what do you do with the existing people inside of the organization so they don't feel like maybe they're being left behind or they're just the old part of the business?
Yeah. So first of all, what we do, we have to be pretty good in our core business. Yeah, because this will still be the backbone of our business. But we have to, of course, we have to all become very digital natives. Because all these trends, connectivity, autonomous driving, sharing mobility, also electrification, at the end is driven by digitalization. So we initiated an initiative called Digital Life at Daimler. So where we really try to bring the digital life, what really affects the customer, into our organization. So we are taking hackathons, open spaces, we have a digital life day, and of course we do it in all our countries. So we do it in China, we do it in Europe, we do it in the US. So that's very, very important. And we also did set up some cultural changes, and we call it Leadership 2020. So what do we mean with Leadership 2020? We set up a team actually of 50 to 60 employees and said, you go from the whole organization across the world, and said, you have to define what is Leadership 2020? What does it actually mean? So it's actually coming all the ideas from the bottom of the organization, and this is now what we are going to implement across Daimler within the next years. So really turn it upside down.
Okay, now corporate transformation is something that's been studied for decades and decades. How do you make sure that Daimler isn't just going to, now we're all wearing blue jeans when we go into to work, and now we're all hiring young people who can grow beards and they're all on their iPhones or their Android smartphones. How do you make sure that Daimler continues to execute, but at the same token brings that DNA in, and how do you know if you're succeeding?
That's a pretty good question. The key challenge is, and we haven't found the right answer yet, regarding all these four trends, connectivity, autonomous driving, shared mobility, electrification, the key challenge is identification of the trends is a piece of cake. That's pretty easy. Also, to come up with the right answers is also a piece of cake. The key challenge at the end is combination of these trends, to find the right answers, to really offer all the services in the combination. And second, we still have our core business, so we have to decide where to invest our money. And the key challenge is we have to spend still billions of dollars into our core business to keep these regulations. I'll give you an example. Emission standards, if you take China, the US, Europe, doesn't matter, are getting tougher and tougher. And this means we still have to invest in combustion engines in billions of dollars. And we have to change this. And on the other hand side, we of course have to invest in electric vehicles, which costs us even more.
Right.
Yeah. And this is the challenge, to really manage this transformation process. And what is also quite important from a cultural perspective, we don't want to have an atmosphere where we have, on the one hand side, one part of the organization which have a feeling of old economy, and the other part of the organization has a feeling of new economy because we're working on the new topics, etc. So that's very, very important, to not have a break through this organization. Because when the people have, I'm old economy, I might in the losing team, etc. So this is very, very important, but that's not going to happen.
How do you look at a company like Tesla, which actually doesn't have the legacy and history, and how do you compete against an organization which doesn't have to manage simultaneously the past and the present and the future? What's Daimler's competitive advantage and or challenges in going up against a firm like that?
I think the big advantage of Tesla is actually, they can push everything in electric vehicles, and we have to manage the transition. And that's a big difference and challenge actually we as a Daimler or Mercedes Benz cars are facing. But on the other hand, we have a lot of experience. We have 130 years of experience in building cars, in defining quality. And there's no difference if it's a combustion engine or electric vehicle, the touch and feel of the car, and how the weight of the car, etc., the chassis components, etc. So that is our experience, and that's, from our perspective, when we come up with an electric vehicle in the next years, we strongly believe it will be the best electric vehicle in the world.
So I think I read that Daimler was going to invest $11 billion dollars or 11 billion euros
Yeah.
into electric vehicles. What are those discussions like internally, where someone says, you know, that's a lot of money, and you've got the existing businesses which are
Yeah.
always under-resourced and always need more heads and always need more dollars. How do those discussions happen inside of the organization?
Actually, you know, we decided within our Mercedes Benz Cars Executive Committee, it's actually a bet, but it's very important because we strongly believe electric vehicles are coming because they are driven by the legislation around the globe. So if you take China, for example, you know, stage 5 in 2025 means 4 liters per 100 kilometers. So this actually means we have to come up with an electrification, be it pure electric vehicle or plug-ins of up to 30%, because otherwise we are not going to meet the CO2 targets. Yeah? But what is even more important to manage the transformation process, to spend 9 billion or 10 billion, that's one part of the story. But you know, the key challenge is that nobody knows what kind of mix do we have in 2025 on a global level. Will it be 10%? Will it be 15%? Will it be 20%? Or even 25%? So what we did is actually we said the most important part is to be 100% flexible. So what do I mean with flexibility? We want to be 100% flexible within our organization, within the production network, across the whole value chain. So this means we put the car, the electric vehicle, on the same production line as the combustion engine car.
So factories can be switched very quickly.
They can switch and we can dress within the mixes. So that's, I think that's the most important part.
Okay.
Because for one simple reason, the electric vehicles, if it really comes to a tipping point to electric vehicles, it won't be additional volume.
Right.
Yeah. So our assumption is it will be 70, 80%, of course, cannibalization within our portfolio. So this means combustion engine or traditional cars going down, the other one is going up. And therefore flexibility is the most important part.
So Daimler and Mercedes are global businesses. I believe I read that 40 to 45% of the sales are in Europe, 20 to 25% in the NAFTA area, and the balance largely in Asia.
Yeah.
How does Daimler, thinking about different regions, different regulations, and the complexities that come with that, balance that with kind of what might be a uniquely European perspective that Daimler might have, being in Germany, where that might inform some of the decisions that might be different than how American companies or some of the other Asian companies might look at how they're addressing these same challenges?
From a design language, from a styling language, we are a German or European company. Yeah? And also from a quality perspective, from a touch and feel. I think this is actually the root of our company, but we have to cope with the customer requirements in the different regions. So therefore we have a dedicated portfolio for China, for example, because China would like to have a long wheelbase, you know, would like to have a primary focus is on four-cylinder engines, and also our top of the range Mercedes Maybach is very, very successful in China. So it's very, very important to see what kind of requirements do we have in the different regions. And I give you another example. You know, we are here at Stanford University in Silicon Valley, but what is also important if it comes to digitalization, the Chinese customers are the most digital affine people around the globe. So they all live in Alibaba, you know, in Tencent, WeChat, and these super apps, you know, on a daily basis, even hours. And they are doing everything, paying, etc. Within their app. Yeah? And therefore digitalization, the whole connectivity stuff is very, very important from our perspective. China is really the most advanced, also from a customer behavior point of view, region. And therefore we have to come up as a company, as a global leader of premium cars, with the right answers to the customers in the different regions.
Do you think your revenue mix changes as you look to add digital services and have more ongoing contact with the customers? Do you need to think differently about not just the automobiles that they drive, and Daimler and Mercedes have always meant, you know, performance and high quality. Now all of a sudden you've got to think about information services, music, entertainment services, music, video, etc. How does Daimler make sure that it's participating in those vectors as well?
I think that's very important. And maybe first of all, you know, also from a regional perspective, this has changed. So China is becoming more and more important. We actually had a mix 10 years ago of 1%, 2% in China, and it's now 22, 23%, and it's rising with double-digit growth rates. So this is just from a regional perspective. Getting back to the cars and to the services, of course we see a change. So we have to add additional services. This is a customer requirement, and the key challenge, once again, is how to make money out of these services. I give you an example. If it comes to streaming, for example, streaming, music, film, movies, etc. The key challenge is in China, if you have the Alibaba, the Tencent, WeChat app, it's all for free.
Right.
It's all for free. So Chinese customers are not willing to pay for it because they already have it for free. Yeah? And therefore the key challenge is what kind of specific services can we offer to our customers and also charge these services. Right. This is the key challenge. So we come up with some ideas. For example, our smart business. So you can have a delivery of your parcel from Amazon, for example, into your smart.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And there are also other ideas which we come up. And really, at the end, the challenge is which services can we charge to make money out of it?
Okay, so are people still going to really want to drive in the future? If we think about Mercedes cars and how much fun they are to drive and the rush, the physical and emotional rush we get from driving a great sports car, as things become more autonomous, does that become less important? Even just and if it does matter, is it just to a smaller subsegment of the population?
From my perspective, I think we are in a pretty good starting situation as a premium car manufacturer for one simple reason. Because if it comes to ride-hailing, autonomous driving, and we call it robo-car services at the end, which we will see in a few years from now in the streets, premium is becoming more affordable. And that's a big, that's a big advantage of Mercedes Benz. Because, just to book a ride-hailing, on a Mercedes just costs you a few cents more compared to a volume car. Yeah? And I think, from our perspective, a big market will evolve for premium cars because premium in all these ride-hailing mobility services will become much more affordable to a lot of people. And therefore, we see a big potential in this market.
So in the spirit of paranoia, right, I used to work for Andy Grove at Intel, who taught us only the paranoid survive. If 10 years from now, Daimler were struggling, and Daimler were having a hard time, what do you think would be the biggest reason that might be the case? The spirit of the question is, what keeps you up at night? What's your biggest worry as you think about how Daimler needs to evolve over the next decade, given all the changes happening in the industry?
From my perspective, the biggest challenge is to cope with these trends. I think we can manage it. But at the end, really to make a business case out of it. And we have the advantage, there have been a lot of rumors, especially among these Silicon Valley companies, they want to enter the automotive business. Automotive business is very, very asset intensive. So they have not the highest interest actually to enter our core business, but they want to be between the customer and the automotive industry. So that's the key challenge we are facing. We don't want to become, at the end, the Foxconn of Apple. Wait, just to give you an example. And this is actually the key challenge. And what I see as the major challenge is really the investment we need to make for all these trends and how does it affect our bottom line. And we still have not so many answers how to make money out of these trends. Because as I told you, the example in China, it's all for free, so customer is not willing to pay for us. So to offer these services, to build up the IT infrastructure, the whole backend, etc., costs billions or millions of dollars. And therefore, really to make at the end a business case out of it, this is the key challenge. And for God's sake, we have a pretty good starting point because within Mercedes-Benz cars, we have, for the time being, return on sales of 10%. But that's a key challenge.
All right, last question for you as the head of strategy for Daimler. Where do you spend your time? If you look at your calendar, your diary over a week, what percentage of your time do you spend on which projects?
It's actually the most of my time is managing the transformation process. So connectivity, autonomous driving, electrification of the drivetrain, and also of the whole product portfolio. And of course, sharing mobility. And this is also very, very important. We have to team up, and this is also a big part of my time, with the best partners in the world to manage these challenges. Be it ride-hailing services, be it autonomous driving, be it electrification. So this is such a complex world. We cannot do it by our own. We have to team up with partners, with the best actually in the world. And that's very, very important. So we have to define what are our internal competences and where do we have to add competencies. Right. And if you take just an example, you know, there have been a lot of articles also in the press about old economy, new economy, friends and enemies, and we created this, you know, this new word frenemies. And at the end, I think that's very, very important. Because if we want to define mobility of the future, we cannot do it by our own. We have to team up with partners, and this means we have to team up with partners in the Western world, and even more important, not even more important, but you know, also quite important, of course, with partners in China.
Right. And so the hard part will be knowing when are these other partners who are large organizations like Daimler, when are they friends and when are they enemies, and sometimes when they're both.
Yeah.
Right. Wilko Stark, thank you for coming to Stanford.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Well,
Thanks.
Thanks.